Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, roustabout.
We already used that one, I think.
Did we use that, Dave?
We used roustabout, yes.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, rapscallion.
We're going to run out of new titles for you eventually. But,
Never. Thank you, Dave, for good producing there.
Sure, buddy.
In this season of Awesome Movie Year, we are looking back at 1994 in film. And in this episode, we have Jason's personal choice, which he is very excited about. Please tell us.
Yeah, to give the listeners a little behind the curtain aspect here of what we do, Josh. Right before we recorded this, we took a little break because I went and got a burrito, Josh, and you were with me. So you remember that
This
burrito.
is a fascinating story so far.
And it's from Chili Verde Express, which I recommend to all you listeners when you come to Las Vegas. And the reason I got that burrito is because I wanted all my energy to talk about this film, Cabin Boy.
Why, Jason, did you choose Cabin Boy?
It's an interesting, I don't love Cabin Boy, first of all. So it's not like I'm like, oh, we got to talk about it this, that. I had gone through a few different picks, as you know, and Cabin Boy also was a finalist for our future cult classic of this season, which will be down the line in episode 11. But Cabin Boy is so weird and strange, and really, when you watch it, the question you ask yourself is this a movie? That's the question I asked myself, and I've seen it twice recently. And the reason I chose it is for, one, it was so reviled by so many people and so many people in the industry, and it didn't deserve all that.
Yeah.
We've both, even if you don't like this movie, I don't know how you feel about it yet, but you've seen worse movies.
I sure have. I've seen lots of worse movies.
Right. And it didn't deserve all of that.
Yeah.
And also, I feel like we're at a point now where movies that are so broad and these comedies that are so like literally, this is one of the strangest movies you'll see. They don't get made anymore. So those were the two reasons. Yeah. And also Chris Elliott, underrated comic performer.
I'm absolutely with you on Chris Elliott. So yeah, as you say, this movie was basically reviled. It was a failure at the box office, although not as big a failure, I think, as, we talked about North in our episode about a flop. This movie, it made $3.7 million on its $10 million budget. Yeah. So that's bad, but it could be worse. It was nominated for the Razzie Award for Worst New Star for Chris Elliott.
Totally undeserving. He's funny.
He is funny. And but he didn't win.
Plus, he was around for a little while before that.
He was.
He wasn't doing movies, though.
No, right. Yeah, he wasn't doing movies. He did David Letterman, and Get a Life, his sitcom, which I love.
And so does Dave, right?
Oh, yeah. I love Get a Life.
I'd like to revisit that.
I haven't seen it in a very, very long time, but I did love it when it was on. But yeah, Chris Elliott lost his Worst New Star award to Anna Nicole Smith for Naked Gun 33 1/3.
Oh, and personally, if I was going to watch an Anna Nicole Smith movie again, I would watch Skyscraper.
What is that? I don't even know that movie.
Well, as you know, in the 90s, I worked at Blockbuster Video.
Yes.
And you remember the 90s had a had a penchant for straight to video movies that were either A, low budget action, or B, lots of boobies. And this one has both A, lots of action, and B, lots of Anna Nicole Smith boobies. There's only two of them, but they appear often. So, but
it's going to take a weird direction there.
No, but I like, as both of my cohorts here know, I like these weird low budget action movies, and I bet you like that one would be a really strange film to revisit.
Well, maybe we'll include that on a future.
When is that?
Episode.
What year is
Skyscraper? I don't know. So review-wise, I had a kind of a tough time finding contemporaneous reviews of this movie because it was not screened for critics, surprisingly enough.
It should have been.
And publications at that time were less inclined to go back and review movies if they hadn't had a chance to see them in advance. But I did find a few. Brian Lowry in Variety says, Elliott, sadly, may have topped out with his 2-minute appearances on Late Night. since subsequent exposures of any greater length have proven grating at best. Think of this as a bad version of an old Saturday Night Live sketch stretched to an interminable 80 minutes. So he was not a Get a Life fan.
All right. First of all, Dave, what do you got for us?
96.
Okay. Well, clearly that's the next
Yeah,
season.
that's your pick for 96.
As I had said, 96 is a good movie, an awesome movie year anyway. But no, but that's not fair. He's not bad in this movie. Like, or at least he's not grating and annoying. Like, we've seen plenty of movies with horrible leads who are just get under your skin, and that's not this.
Right. No, I mean, I think the character is meant to be sort of annoying, or at least is annoying to the other characters, but he gives an effective performance as that character. And that's kind of his comedic persona. His character in Get a Life is extremely annoying to every single other character on that show.
Yeah, look, Chris Elliott is the man-child incarnate as a, you know, if you're going to look at the Sandler movies and the Farley movies of the 90s, right? Like, they're all man-child. You know, you got to grow up and this and that. And the cabin boy, as we find out in the movie, becomes a cabin man. He does grow up.
Yeah, and this is we could talk about this a little more, but this is absolutely the kind of movie I could see Adam Sandler doing a much worse version of and making a bunch of money for it.
Right. I mean, dude, let's not forget, originally Tim Burton was assigned to direct this because he likes Chris Elliott's comedy on Letterman and probably Get a Life also, right?
Yes.
So yeah, it would have been a way different movie. I bet you they still would have like crapped all over it. But I mean, Chris Elliott's not the problem with this film.
No, I don't think that he is. So here's a slightly more positive review. David Mills in the Washington Post. Cabin Boy contains about enough laugh out loud sight gags and non sequiturs to justify what it demands of a viewer's time and money. Elliott, more so than the average person, seems to find unpleasant behavior inherently funny. The early part of the film, filled with Elliott's effete insults, simpering, and whining, doesn't establish an endearing mood. But as the tale unfolds and the seamen encounter such wondrous sights as a half-man, half-shark and an ice monster, Elliott and his writing partner and director Adam Resnick hit their stride with simple and surprisingly effective comic ideas. So he sort of came around to it.
Yeah, eventually. I think that's who did that again?
That's David Mills in the Washington Post.
That's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And briefly, Owen Gleiberman in Entertainment Weekly said, "Few comedies have worked this hard to make everyone on screen look this dumb."
I don't think they worked that hard. I think they all naturally looked, they played their roles to look that dumb.
Yeah, I mean, I think they did work hard on this movie. I mean, you can tell that they put every effort that they could into making this film.
And I would like to offer one more quote from my Facebook and my Facebook friend and real life acquaintance, Ian Zeitzer, who, when he found out we were doing Cabin Boy for this episode, wrote, "Cabin Boy, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, a landmark of cult cinema and cinema in general, and all of mankind's achievements in any field."
So there's at least one fan.
There's way more than one fan because, and we'll put this up on the website or in the show notes. The Ringer did an awesome oral history of Cabin Boy where they interview Elliott and they interview Adam Resnick and they interview some famous musicians who are huge fans of Cabin Boy to the point where they've named albums and stuff after Cabin Boy. So it definitely has a cult following at this point in time.
It does. So you said you've seen it twice recently. Did you see it when it first came out?
I think I saw it on video back in the day, and I didn't like it back then. And then after I'd read the history article from Ringer, I wanted to see it again. And I watched it when I was kind of laid up after my surgeries in December. I'm okay, guys. Thanks. And then, after that, when we were really deep diving in 94, I just said this is a very quintessential, important, essential film to 1994.
Yeah. I had never seen it before this past week or two when I watched it for this episode. But like I said, I loved Get a Life. I remember being a huge fan of that show. I think it was on right after The Simpsons when it first premiered. And of course, I was a massive Simpsons fan and watched it So I liked Chris Elliott. I don't know why I didn't watch this movie at the time it came out, other than that it probably left theaters in like a week.
Yeah, there were so many jokes about it and
Right.
whatnot.
Right.
Can I tell a quick story?
Please.
So I, as we already established, I loved Get a Life as a kid. It was probably my favorite show. And I went to see this in the theater opening night. And it is, as far as I can remember, the first time I was disappointed in a movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Like when I went and saw it, I left the theater and I was like, that sucked. I was so disappointed. I haven't watched it since. I have a feeling I might like it more now, just looking at the pure stupidity and ridiculousness of it all. But yeah, it's the first time I remember actually being disappointed by a movie.
Yeah, if only there was a reason for you to have watched it before we recorded the podcast on it.
Yeah, that is a good point.
It would have been interesting to hear if you liked it.
Right, yeah, because I wonder how I would have felt if I had seen it at the time, because I did love Get a Life. And Get a Life gets really, really weird in its later episodes. Yeah. And I think, honestly, far weirder than Cabin Boy, or at least that's the way I remember it. Mm-hmm. And so I wonder if I would have been disappointed in seeing this movie as well.
I'm excited to hear what you think about it when we get back.
Sounds good. We'll return with our general thoughts on Cabin Boy. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year for 1994. In this episode, we are talking about Jason's personal pick for 1994, Cabin Boy. And as you said earlier, you picked this movie, but not necessarily because you like it.
I don't dislike it. I don't love it, though. This would not have been, if you had said pick your favorite movie of the year, like we had already, we've already done Clerks, we've already done Pulp Fiction. So those would have been two early choices. But there are plenty of other movies I like better and comedies that I like better from this year. But it's just so polarizing that, and I feel like it does gets a bad rap in the history of pop culture, that I thought we needed to look at this.
Yeah.
And put it in its proper place once and for all.
The definitive statement on Cabin Boy
after
this podcast.
No one needs to question where it belongs.
Yes.
What about after I watch it again, finally?
Okay. Well, fair enough. We can do a breaking it apart episode of piecing it together.
Good idea, Josh.
The movies this has influenced.
So yeah, I watched it. I don't love it. It's 80 minutes and there's some funny stuff throughout, and Chris Elliott's cool. So I liked it, and I'm sure after we get your general thoughts, we'll talk about the ultimate cameo of movie cameos.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I had never seen this before, and I remember you talking about it the first time that you rewatched it, like a couple months ago or something like that. And I feel like because I had loved Get a Life so much, but I also have not watched that since I originally saw it. And because of the reputation that this movie had, I was prepared for like the weirdest movie I had ever seen. And what I wrote on Letterboxd afterwards is that it's just not weird enough. I was hoping for it to be weirder. It is weird. And there are moments that I found amusing, and I'm glad I finally watched it, that I had a reason that kind of pushed me to watch this movie. But more than like whether I thought it was good or bad, I thought it was okay. There were parts that I was amused by. I just, I had these kinds of expectations that I think were not met. And that's on me for building it up, I think.
So name a movie that you wanted it to be as weird as.
Oh, see now, yeah, you're putting me on the spot. And I mean, I guess I was hoping for it to be maybe as weird as some kind of like non-Hollywood fiasco, like The Room or something like that, which obviously it's not going to be on that level because it had a budget, even if it was too small, and it was made by people who'd made movies before and knew what they were doing.
You basically wanted like Brian De Palma presents Cabin Boy or something.
That would have been something, certainly.
I think your assessment is fair. Like it could have been weirder for me, and I would have been like, that's cool. Like, let's just go for this ride.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if I think more, and probably when we're done, I'll come up with some actual like Hollywood movies with this kind of reputation that are weirder than this. I guess I wanted it to be as weird as Get a Life, or as my memories of Get a Life, which may not be entirely accurate.
But the 90s was a time filled with like comedies where you could pretty much, I mean, they'll call it broad, but whatever, like you could pretty much do anything, right? Like, Happy Gilmore, after Chubbs dies, he's standing with the gator that killed him in heaven, and also Abraham Lincoln. Like, why? You know what I mean? You could do all that stuff and get away with it, and people wouldn't question it. I think the weird stuff that you're missing is that Chris Elliott would often answer questions that were completely not asked to him. So a lot of the humor comes from like a setup and a punchline that don't belong together.
Yeah.
Which to me, that's like, I'm like, what? Like that's not a way to answer this question or whatnot. And that's where it really gets weird in like the playing of like dialogue and jokes. And also there's a talking cupcake that spits tobacco at people.
Right.
So,
I'm not arguing with you that this movie is not weird or that it's not weird, certainly compared to other movies that came out around the same time. Yeah, and I can see how this movie is beloved. We talked about certain comedians and people who like it, and definitely it has that anti-comedy aspect of it where
Right.
you're the setup comes and you expect a certain kind of punchline and it undercuts what you expect.
Yeah, this could have been a Tim Heidecker movie or something like that.
Yes.
So.
And so I'm kind of on the border. Like, I feel like I like weird comedy, but some of that really dry anti-comedy where it's, I hate Tim Heidecker stuff. And so when it's really like aggressively trying to alienate you, I think that puts me off. And this movie is not necessarily that. This movie is affable. It's pleasant.
Yeah. So I guess if you were going to say it was alienating or wanting to put you off, it would be at the beginning where where Chris Elliott is about to graduate the fancy lad school. And, he's graduating as a fancy lad. And the thing about it is like, there's no attempt to age him down at all. Right. He's losing his hair. He's got a full beard. Like, he's in his mid-30s clearly, right? And it's just like we're accepting that he's in school. Alfred Molina is playing one of the teachers.
I think maybe uncredited even Alfred Molina in this movie.
So I mean, and he, as a fancy lad before he goes on the ship, the what's the filthy whore? Yeah, the filthy whore, not the Queen Catherine where
he's supposed to go on that.
He's a dick to everybody. But it's kind of funny because it's Chris Elliott, so he's not like an in-your-face dick. He's like a very subversive dick. People.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that I like about Chris Elliott and why I can enjoy his work and be so put off by some other anti-comedy stuff is because he always seems like he's so nice and pleasant. Even when he's treating people poorly, he's just kind of oblivious and he thinks he's doing the nice thing. And that's the character in this movie, as well as I think his character in like Get a Life. I love that they don't answer that question or they don't make any effort to tell you like how old he is. Chris Elliott, of course, as I think it maybe mentions in that Ringer article that you were talking about, looked like he was 50 when he was 20.
Yeah.
That's kind of all. He's always looked like an old man. And that's kind of his thing. Also in this movie is like, when does this movie take place? Like, what year is it?
That's part of the fun of it, right? Because he does go to a private fancy lad school and he wears
a wig.
Right. And he gets on like the filthy whore, which is like an old timey fishing boat, but he takes a limo to get there. Right.
Yeah.
And when he takes the limo, the limo driver kicks him out because he doesn't like him. So he has to walk to town. And it's this like old fishing village, right? Where there's like literally like, merchants on the street. And that's where we get the all-time greatest movie cameo in the history of cinema. David Letterman as a street urchin / merchant, and trying to sell Chris Elliott stuffed monkeys. Hey,
yes.
You want to buy a monkey?
Right. That is, and I will say before seeing that movie, because I was a big Letterman fan in the 90s, the main thing I knew about this movie was that Letterman would attempt to sell a monkey.
Yeah, he says, "Hey, you want to buy a monkey?" And but it's like Letterman, in the Ringer article, I think they talk about it. Like it felt like he just came in one day and he was like, "I'm just going to do what I want to do."
Right.
And it literally did feel like that, where he's like, "You're one of them fancy lads. I hate you," And then he goes, he's like, "Hey, when you get on the ship, don't settle for that prime rib. Get the London broil." It's like, again, like that line. Why is that line there? So it's just fun in that regard to me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think what else could you possibly do if you get David Letterman but let him do whatever he wants? I mean, right. you can't. You'd be wasting your David Letterman appearance by making him read certain lines.
Yeah, and Letterman made fun of it throughout the years, of course, including when he hosted the Oscars. The cabin boy of Oscars.
That is a great designation for that Oscars.
Which I personally like those Oscars. And he had Adam Resnick to direct like a segment. I don't know if it was like auditions for Cabin Boy or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah, Letterman is a fun appearance in this movie, and Chris Elliott. Yeah, he's good. I liked the blatant artificiality of this movie.
Yes.
The way that they're clearly filming in a water tank, and
Yeah.
you know, the sets and everything, and that's like Adam Resnick, I think in that Ringer article downplays his own abilities as a director, but that's a real aesthetic choice that he made here that I think works and adds to that sense of surreality to it.
Yeah, it's really fun. And again, like we were saying, it was going to be Tim Burton, and then he dropped to, go make
Ed
Batman
Wood. He was
Penguin or
making
something.
Ed Wood,
Ed Wood.
which is a great movie. So
Yeah, that is a good one. So, and so Resnick, who had never really directed before, they were like, you make the movie. And he got like $10 million, and he put together some weird stylistic choices, but there's a definite point of view, a definite style to the whole thing, right? And both Elliott and Resnick say, if we knew we were going to make a movie for ourselves, this isn't what we would have made, right? So,
Right.
They're basically taking a project that they were hand delivering to someone else to make with them, and now they're making their own interpretation of it. So I think they did a pretty good job in that regard.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like a movie. Like if I hadn't known that Tim Burton was involved in this movie, I wouldn't come away from this movie thinking, oh, this is some kind of Tim Burton ripoff or whatever. Like Burton does some of that similar deliberately artificial stuff, but I think he does it in a different way. And this movie doesn't feel like somebody trying to copy Tim Burton's style. And I also think that once they were stuck with making the movie themselves, even if it wasn't the idea or the characters that they would have come up with if they were able to do whatever they wanted, they clearly put their own spin on it. It definitely feels like a Chris Elliott thing.
Yeah, well, like we said, you have the half man, half shark, right?
Yes, with Chalky. Yes.
Yeah, and then you have a 6-armed temptress on an island who takes the cabin boy's virginity, Callie, right? And
yeah.
She's married to a salesman who's also a giant.
I loved that was my favorite character, the sort of like schlubby office guy with the pocket protector who was also a giant.
Yeah, for no reason,
right,
or any mention of it. And then Chris Elliott and or Nathaniel Mayweather, that was his name. He and Chalky have to defeat him. The giant.
Yeah.
So, I had read this quote by Chris Elliott. I'm not sure where, but originally they wanted to do something like Aku Aku by Thor Heyerdahl. They wanted to do a parody of it, which is beyond my level of comprehension.
Yeah.
But I thought that was they're ambitious.
They are. Ambitious. Yeah. They mention, I think Captain's Courageous comes up a lot, and the Sinbad movies, and you can definitely see that in the high seas adventure stuff and the coming of age, which is something I think in Captain's Courageous. And of course it's absurd for Nathaniel to be coming of age in this movie because, as we noted, he's clearly a middle-aged man.
Yeah. So, and look, there's so much weird stuff in it. We mentioned that he kind of envisions a tobacco spitting cupcake who razzes him, and then there's also Andy Richter as like a half-wit at best, original cabin boy, and when he causes Andy Richter's death, they make him the cabin boy.
Yes.
And Andy Richter's, going around saying, you want to see how the ladies in the harem dance or something, right? Just weird stuff. The other thing we should mention is the love interest.
Yeah, Melora Walters. Yeah.
Trina. And the way he meets her is he's stuck out at sea where they make him do a,
on watch or something like that.
Like a long distance watch on a raft where, that's not going well for him. And she's swimming around the world. So that's kind of fun that,
right.
He
destroys her world record setting attempt.
Yeah, which is fun. She's interesting in this movie, huh?
Yeah, she is. And I haven't seen her in a lot of other things that I can think of. But it's funny to me. And that seems like the whole idea of him having this relatively straightforward love interest is like a vestige of a more, mainstream, like the kind of thing Adam Sandler would do. He always would get, no matter how weird his character is, he's got some sort of bland female character that he has to fall in love with. And But I think even though like her character as a character is not very weird, they let her do some weird stuff. I mean, he rides her like she's I don't know, like a dolphin or
Surfboard
something.
or-
Yeah, like he's in a SeaWorld show and she's his trained animal.
I just think like, again, like going back to the dialogue, I had written some stuff down because
You're just
there's
gonna read off bits of dialogue.
no,
from the
but
movie?
just
yeah.
but like, so first of all, let me clean up the Letterman line, which was, hey, when you're on the Queen Catsman, don't let him give you any of that flank steak bullshit. You know what I mean? Try the London broil, which is just funny if you think about Letterman saying it, right? But when I'm talking about like jokes that don't make any sense or like, or are there specifically because they are not funny, you know, and that's what makes them funny, right? At one point, Nathaniel says, I've yanked that silver spoon from my mouth and buried it 6,000 miles beneath the earth's crust. I mean, figuratively, of course. Who could possibly do such a thing? That would be insane. It's a horrible joke, but it's funny when he says it.
Yeah, I mean, and the humor there, of course, is that he's like over-explained it to an absurd degree.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if I actually like laughed out loud during this movie while I was watching it. I don't know if I did, but I definitely appreciated the level of humor that was happening.
Yeah, I mean, like, I just don't get it. She seems totally uninterested in me despite my smothering obsessiveness. That's a fun line.
Yeah, yeah.
We should call this place Wackyville because it's wacky.
That's a very Letterman sounding line too. Yeah.
And then, you know, when and then there's the bit where the limo driver kicks him out and he prays to God. And it's not that he's praying for safety or that he can get home. He prays that the Lord won't let him break a sweat, which is, you know, there's some funny stuff there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think ultimately this movie is certainly not deserving of such a harsh reputation. Whether it's deserving of the sort of opposite of that, which is this cult adoration that some people have for it, I don't know about that. I think to me, it just struck me as like an inconsistent misfire.
Well, maybe that's why, right? When there's a group that hates something so much, you're going to have that backlash, and you're probably right. It belongs somewhere in the middle, you know, but the guys, you know, Brian Doyle-Murray and the rest of the sailors, they're a fun group, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's a weird film, Josh.
It is a weird film. Are there any other aspects you feel like we should highlight?
No, I thought the visual was important, like you said. I think, you know, it was set up nicely for a sequel, sadly.
Would you really have wanted to see Cabin Boy 2?
No, but you know, I would have. So
yeah. I mean, we still could. It's still possible. How many movies have sequels decades later these days?
Or a remake, a reboot of Cabin Boy.
Who would star in the reboot of Cabin Boy?
Well, who's 50 right now? Chris Elliott. We should have Chris Elliott.
That would be awesome if he did the reboot and he was still a fancy lad.
Yeah, and you could rewrite most of it. That would be.
It looks basically the same.
Yeah, he really does. Yeah,
that would be really fun. You know.
Yes.
Have Abby Elliott in there as not as the love interest.
No, that would be too much. I think.
But she could be maybe one of the sailors this time.
Yeah, maybe it's an all-female sailing crew.
Yeah. Or as the cupcakes. Yeah, she could be the Andy Richter part.
Right, cabin girl.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll. I guess we got to give it a rating, right? Out of.
I was going to suggest out of Letterman monkeys.
All right.
So,
out of Letterman's monkeys, out of 5, how many do you want to give it?
I'm giving it 3 Letterman monkeys.
So. I give it 2.5. I feel like that's as generous as I can possibly be.
There you go. So Wong Kar Wai.
to say
you know, Crumb. Sorry, guys. You guys just don't.
Yeah, well, that's why it's your pick for this season. So we'll come back and talk a little more about the legacy of Cabin Boy. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year for 1994. We're talking about Jason's favorite movie of all time and the greatest achievement in human history, Cabin Boy.
I thought it was pretty good. I didn't say all that.
So, I mean, we talked a little bit about this, especially with that recent big article in The Ringer about the legacy of Cabin Boy. Certainly, it's gotten this big cult following over time.
Yeah. I mean, again, like you wonder why studios aren't a little more creative, right, in their marketing. You know, after the first week, why not just be like, hey, go get stoned, see it with your friends. We're going to show it at midnight on all these college campuses, and you guys can say whatever you want, right? I feel like it's a perfect midnight cult movie to watch, right?
Yeah.
And if I was in college again, you know, I could totally see myself going to a theater at midnight to see this. So, you know, to me, the legacy is it's a film that was not properly placed. It's not the worst movie of all time by any means. And as you said, like there's the backlash against it where people are like, this is a genius effort. And even the filmmakers would say like, nah, probably not, but it's not at all. But at least we tried something, right?
Right.
So
yeah. I think they could have built that cult following more effectively from the start in the way you're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you know, both Resnick and Elliott have said they've never been able to work together again.
Right.
They had even sold a show together, and then when like one of the executives found out it was those two, they kiboshed it because Cabin Boy had such a bad, you know, reputation that
Right.
like, that's the curse of Cabin Boy. These two best friends who are simpatico can't work together, but we know they've done great comedy before, right?
Yeah.
On Letterman and Get a Life. Like,
yeah.
wouldn't it have been cool to see some other stuff with these guys?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, both of them, their careers definitely never reached that next level. I mean, they've continued to work. Adam Resnick has not directed another film since then. But, you know, again, in that article, it sounds like he never really wanted to be a
Successful
director in the
writer,
beginning.
novelist.
Yeah, he was interested in writing. Chris Elliott has never really been the star of a film, but he's a very steadily working character actor.
Yeah, I mean, look, we all remember him from There's Something About Mary, obviously.
Yeah.
And what he's is he a regular on Schitt's Creek?
Yeah, he is a regular on that, which has got quite a cult following of its own
Yeah.
right now.
Now, here's the thing. Would you have wanted Chris Elliott to have achieved like Sandler level fames? I would not. I think he's way better as this kind of like fringe figure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would have liked for him to get the chance, like you were saying, maybe with Adam Resnick, to do some other projects of his own rather than just being a highlight of someone else's thing.
Did either of you guys watch Eagleheart on Adult Swim?
Well, yeah, there's that, which is, I think, really not that good.
Yeah, a lot of people think like that's like his redemption.
Yeah.
I don't think he needed to redeem himself, and he's done good work over the years. So.
Right. Yeah, we were talking a little bit about Abby Elliott, and there's an indie film out, I think this year or late last year, called Clara's Ghost, which is the whole Elliott family, Abby Elliott, Bridie Elliott, his other daughter who directed it, Chris Elliott, and his wife, whose name is not Elliott, and I can't recall.
So Chris Elliott, that's those are his daughters, like you said.
Yeah.
And his dad is in Cabin Boy.
Right, Bob Elliott, who was also his dad on Get a Life.
Right,
I mean, it's quite a legacy. But Clara's Ghost is a movie that is extremely off-putting and very jarring and abrasive, and I really was not a fan of it. But it's the kind of thing, even though it's his daughter who wrote it and directed it, it's the kind of really weird, like niche product that you could imagine him getting the chance to make if he had gone in a different direction.
That was Bridie Elliott who made that, right?
Yeah, it's Bridie Elliott who directed, but all of them are in it. Abby Elliott is in it, and Chris Elliott is in it, and his wife as well, who's not an actress. I think that was the first thing she ever acted in. And they play a family, not themselves. They have different names, but it's like they're playing like a showbiz family, and they have a lot of similarities.
Now, am I wrong? Bridie Elliott, was she in Fort Tilden?
Yeah, she was in Fort Tilden and was on Search Party, and those definitely have a similarly dry, arch sense of humor.
And Search Party is a good show, but Fort Tilden's one of my favorite movies of the last 10 years. So I'm all in on the Elliots. I'd love to see Abby Elliott do more. She's talented.
Yeah, she is. I mean, I think they all are. That was part of why I was sort of disappointed in seeing Clara's Ghost, which is not funny and not even really, I don't know if it's even trying to be, and it was a big disappointment to me, but that is sort of part of the legacy here.
Yeah, and I mean the real legacy is these two quotes from Chris and Adam.
Yeah.
Chris Elliott says, "I don't think any of the crew completely understood what we were trying to do, and maybe that's because we didn't totally understand what we were trying to do." And Adam Resnick says, "We'll go to our graves not really understanding Cabin Boy." That's art, baby.
Right. I mean, I think that's one of the funny things is that, like, a lot of times with movies where they fail at first and then they get this cult following later on, the creators really embrace that and are happy to have that recognition. And Chris Elliott and Adam Resnick even now seem to sort of be baffled as to why anyone would like this movie.
Yeah, but I think they were also baffled as to why there was so much hate towards it.
Right. No, that's true. That's true. The other thing we did mention, or you mentioned, what is it? Dan the Automator, the musicians who have sort of titled songs and albums after this movie. And that's how you know something has reached people on a deeper level that really it like stays with them for a long time.
Cabin Boy has the same street cred as like Ric Flair at this point in time, you know? So.
Man, Rob Van Dam last time, and now Ric Flair. We're
Ric
just
Flair
gonna turn this into a pro wrestling podcast.
No, Rob Van Dam, that was a fun little joke for last time. Ric Flair has permeated pop culture. He's bigger than the industry he was originally in, much like Cabin Boy itself. Film here, like level, it's like 5'6" tall. Cabin Boy is like 7 foot, is as tall as the Giant, and they play the 7'8" or something.
So what you're saying, let me get my metaphors right. So Cabin Boy is the Ric Flair of movies, and the David Letterman Oscars is the Cabin Boy of Oscars.
No, I didn't say that. You said that.
I think we're gonna have to go to the replay on that.
No, it's hey. If we're talking about 1994 and we're deep diving into a year, I'm glad we covered this. I think it's a worthwhile cover.
I agree. Like I said, I was mixed about it, but I'm glad that I had a chance to watch it.
So the audience agrees that I'm winning 1-0 in personal picks. Cabin Boy beats 2-9.
We'll call it a draw.
It's not a competition.
It is not. No, we're all about, what was it? Consensual movie watching that we said last time. Yeah.
And we're going to watch a variety of movies consensually together.
We are indeed. So that is Cabin Boy, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. Check us out on social media.
Yes, we are on social media at Awesome Movie Year. On everything, on all the things. You name a thing, Dave.
Friendster.
Yep, we're on there. Awesome Movie Year. So,
and Jason,
I am on all the things at Jason Harris Comedy or J Harris Comedy. You can find me on the web, my website, goforjason.com.
I'm on Twitter at Signal Bleed and on Facebook at Josh Bell Hates Everything, and also at joshbellhateseverything.com. And our great producer, David Rosen, and his awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Yeah, you can find Piecing It Together at piecingpod.com and find us on social media at piecingpod as well.
So what do we have lined up for next time, Jason?
We are doing something a little crazy next time, Josh. So we are doing the Sundance Film Festival Grand Jury Prize winner next year. And next episode.
In a year from now.
We're taking a sabbatical. No, we're not. From 1994. And it's a movie I had never heard of before called What Happened Was.
Yeah, I had heard a tiny bit about it, but had not ever seen it. And I think it's a movie people don't know a lot about, from actor Tom Noonan. So tune in next time to hear about What Happened Was. And this has been Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.